All right, yet another showdown between Dems and the DHS. A group of Maryland lawmakers staging an impromptu sit-in at a Baltimore ICE detention facility after claiming they were illegally denied entry. Let's bring in Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, chairman of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. Senator, welcome to you. First up, what do you want to add to what we've learned about this sit-in at this Maryland facility?
You know, my first impression is not to be too critical of protests, frankly. I don't agree with their precept, but at the same time, I remember people sitting in at the jail about the January 6th protesters, who many of them were held in bad conditions. The idea of sit-ins and protests to draw attention to things you find unjust is an American tradition, so I don't fault them for that. I don't agree with their premise, but at the same time, I don't fault them for wanting to draw attention to their complaints.
Well, this is some of what the Democrats at that Baltimore ICE facility had to say. Listen.
President Trump lied to the American people when he said that the Trump administration was simply going to focus on, quote, the worst of the worst.
We had questions about medical care. We had questions about the number of detainees. We had questions about visits from lawyers and others. And all we got, quite frankly, was a very shrill and chilly response.
What's your reaction to those Democrats?
Well, same reaction I had to, people protesting the January 6th protesters that have been in prison. Nobody was giving us answers. So you protest, you try to draw attention to things you believe, and then you try to get answers. I do think that the majority of the thrust has been towards people who are criminals in this country. And I think if you ask the American people, probably 95% of the American people are for expelling the criminal element that has come into this country. But I think the numbers change if you start talking about people who are maids and carpenters and construction workers, agricultural workers. Even the president has changed his tune on allowing some people who are actually actively employed to have a different standard. So I hope the different standard will be, let's get rid of the criminals, let's get rid of the gangs, but let's have a discussion about what we're going to do after that.
Well, they are really, the DHS, taking on these Democrats, including Chris Van Hollen. They're mocking him and these Democrats for staging this sit-in. Here's what Tom Homan had to say about Van Hollen.
He's an embarrassment to the position he holds. The Democrats are upset because we're proving every day what a national security threat, a public safety threat the Biden administration allowed, and he was silent. They're embarrassed because we're proving exactly what they did, and President Trump is keeping his promise to American people, and they can't stand it. They want to flip the script. They want to mismessage to the American people. Well, it's not working.
All right, from the DHS now to the Federal Reserve. Senator, you got our attention with this op-ed you penned, published on foxbusiness.com about the Fed needing to be more transparent. You said there are 186 billion reasons why we must audit the Fed. The Federal Reserve, you say, pays hundreds of billions to banks while operating at a loss and increasing national debt. What's your message here? As President Trump just met with Federal Reserve Chair Jay Powell, here's a bit of what he said after that meeting. Listen.
Chairman can say to you today that would make you back off some of the earlier criticism?
Well, I'd love him to lower interest rates. Other than that, what can I tell you?
Because he's nicknamed him Too Late Powell, saying he's missed the opportunity to boost the economy by cutting those interest rates. So what are you calling on for the Federal Reserve here in the wake of all that?
There's a weird practice that the Federal Reserve started in 2009 where they pay big banks to keep reserves at the Fed to not loan their money. So they're paying banks not to loan their money. But primarily it's very large banks. So it's billion-dollar banks with CEOs making hundreds of millions of dollars who are being paid not to loan money. I think it's crazy. $186 billion last year was paid to big banks. Over 40% of it was paid to foreign banks. So think about it. The Fed buys treasury bills from our government. That's how our government borrows money. And then the government, Congress, pays interest to the Fed. So that interest that's coming from our general revenue to the Federal Reserve is then given to wealthy bankers in New York and around the world. It's something that brings Bernie Sanders and myself together, talk about the oligarchy. I don't like an oligarchy if the taxpayer is forced to give money to rich bankers in New York and rich bankers around the world. This brings Bernie and I together, so we have a bill to stop it. We have a bill to stop it. We also have a bill to audit the Fed. So there's a lot of things that can be done. I'm not a big fan of saying we should set the interest rates. In fact, I'm the opposite. I think the market should set the interest rates, and it should be based on the supply and demand of money.
Well, the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate, right? It's maximum employment, stable prices. Inflation has come way down under this presidency, and you've got the unemployment rate back down to those lower levels. So why do you fathom they're waiting so long? Why is Jerome Powell waiting so long to lower those interest rates? Is that the transparency you want?
I think the first thing to understand is nobody knows what the correct interest rate is. The same way nobody knows what the correct price of bread, meat, chicken, poultry, all of these things, that is set by the marketplace. And so it'd be like interviewing, let's say you interview 100 college students and you say, is tuition too high? Well, the popular vote would be tuition's too high. If you interview 100 people going to the grocery store or buying a car, is the price of a car too high? We don't set prices based on the whims of the mob or the whims of the populace. It's based on supply and demand. If you look historically at interest rates, they're based on inflation plus about 2 or 3 points. So if inflation is 2% and there's historically a 2 to 3% demand, if I give you my money for 30 years, you got to pay me something or I'm not going to give up the use of my money, that's a 2 to 3%. So 4 to 5 is not out of the world. But the bottom line is I don't believe that anybody knows what interest rates should be. And so we shouldn't clamor to raise them or lower them. We should be arguing, let the marketplace decide.
Well, the Federal Reserve Chair has to make a decision at this next meeting, and right now,
not necessarily. There's a way that the market can decide. The market is part of deciding what interest rates are, and there's a way that the Federal Reserve could be less obvious and less pushy one way or the other. Let the market decide.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always for the open market, free markets. It's always going to prevail. It's always going to be more efficient. Prices or discovery is always going to be better, but that's just the way it's set up right now. And President Trump is still insisting that they should come down. Always appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much, Senator.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.